Ed, could you lead this interview in a moment of prayer before we begin?
That sounds like a good idea, Brent. Okay, Lord, we come before you, and we're very excited about what we're going to do here, and we just honor the blood of Jesus over our time together. We ask, Lord, that you would orchestrate the entire time together, that you would be here in our midst, and that we'd accomplish what we really need to in this, because we want this thing to glorify you in every way, and we want it to be something that will be taken and used in a positive way. And I'm just all about the 7 mountains of influence, Lord, and I'd like to see the influence in the area of arts and entertainment advance, and we make a dent, Lord. So I just thank you in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
That made me really think, man, just then about those 7 mountains. That's a whole thing in itself. That's not my concept, but that's actually Bill Bright from Campus Crusade in the 50s came up with that. But it's really what we're supposed to do as Christians is get out of the pew and go in there and mold the culture, like the government, education, arts, entertainment, the media. I know there's a couple more, I can't remember them all, but we're supposed to get out there and do something with it, with the giftings that he has given us. And obviously you're loaded. You got your barrels loaded with your ability to do this. And I feel like I have a specific call in this time to. My story is unique, and it's a launching pad to accomplish a lot. So I'm really pumped up. I'm excited.
Now you're not going to hear, I'm just giving it so I can edit that out. So during this interview, I'll be asking questions, and if you see me kind of reacting body language-wise without sound, it's because I don't corrupt that sound or that sound in the background. So don't be offended if like you see me going.
What will that mean?
That's just pretty much if I would be like, oh my God, that's an insane story. Please keep telling me.
Oh, okay.
It's just so that way it doesn't pick up on the microphone.
Oh, I see. It's just body language.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you hear me, if you see my body language reacting, don't think like you have to stop or anything. That's just me just reacting
I got you.
inadvertently.
Yeah,
but,
that'll help. That'll help actually. Yeah.
And then also at the same time, if, as I mentioned, you do need to take any breaks, just mention it to me. That's not a problem to pause any of this.
Yeah, you never know. It might hit me all at once. So far, I'm good.
So Ed, before we, as we begin, can you please state your name, branch of service, and your retiring rank?
Yes, I was in the U.S. Army in 1967 through 69, and I was a combat artist. Any more?
I'm normally just going to actually pause also for 4 or 5 seconds after, so that way I can easily edit it in the video program. So that's where you're going to see me kind of doing like maybe weird pauses.
Okay.
So that's just why.
Okay.
So Ed, tell me a little about your family, where you were born, and what was your childhood like?
Well, I was born in Toronto, Canada, and we moved actually from Canada. My dad had a dream, and my mother went along with it, to come to, he wanted to be in acting. He was an actor in Canada, acted on stage with Lorne Greene, you know, the Bonanza guy, and then with Alan Young, the Talking Horse. He did a lot of plays with him, and so it was in his blood to act, and he had a dream, and what better place to come than California? So he knew he had to get us out of the snow and get us down here. So we came in 1947 to Santa Barbara, California, which is really, in those days, that was a kind of an area for plays to be seen by Hollywood scouts. It was an up-and-coming area to get noticed. So he was involved he was in the midst of that, and that was really launching him into it. When I don't know if I could go into the whole story, but bottom line is he was picked for Home of the Brave, which became a classic, and he was going to be a lead role. He performed beautifully in Santa Barbara, and the scouts picked him up, and they basically gave him the part. And then disappointed though, because Lloyd Bridges said he wanted the part, and he had experience in Broadway, so they gave it to him and took it away from my dad. My dad said, "That's it. I'm going to devote my life to my family." And so he became dedicated to my success, my mother's and my sister's, and he was the greatest dad I think you could possibly have. He had a work ethic. He was just a trooper, you know, and he just made my life beautiful. Now looking back, I think about him every day, I think. So I'm very pleased with his care for me, I think is what it is, and for my mother and sister. And I just had my growing up time was awesome. And it was in a beautiful time of the California, when it was orange groves and beach was beautiful, and of course it still is, but it was just a time, Disneyland was built back then when I was a kid. And the first week Disneyland opened, I was there on my birthday, my 12th birthday. July 16th it opened, and that's my birthday. And
don't you have a family connection through a cousin?
Yeah. Yeah, when I was a little kid, my dad took me to see my uncle, Ken, and he had this whole spread on his table with these blueprints. And he says, and so I said, what is all that? And he says, well, Eddie, that's going to be a theme park. They're going to call it Disneyland. And he said, here it's all laid out. And by the way, John, my dad's name was John, you're a businessman. Why don't you buy these orange groves right over here? Because it's right next to where they're going to build it. Nobody knows it's going to be built there. But if you buy these, you'll make a lot of money. My dad didn't do it. But anyway, Disneyland, of course, became historic. And I just remember that. That's something significant. And I remember when I got drafted in the bus, taking us to Fort Ord, we passed Disneyland, and I looked out the window and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm leaving all this behind, this fun and all this great life, and where am I going to go? What's going to happen? It was the great unknown, you know, at that time, because you don't know what you're going to do. You're drafted, and they can decide what they want you to do. And the story goes, pretty amazing story.
We'll regress a little before that, if that's okay, because
Yeah.
I'm curious to, what were some of your earliest influences in drawing and creating art for you?
Well, that's a good question. I had a zeal for art from the time I was 4 or 5 years old. I remember doing a lot of crayon drawings. My dad would take me to the movies in Santa Barbara. We'd see the Errol Flynn movies of the pirates, and so I'd come home and sketch these all out. And by the way, when I do presentations now, one of the first things I do is show those pictures of my childhood art. And people think it's really kind of fun to look at because it's, you know, I've got World War II aircraft and ships with pirates in the sails. It's just crazy, but that's the way a little 5-year-old would interpret it. So that was, and then watching my mother, she was an artist, and she would go out in the countryside in Santa Barbara, and she'd come on with these spectacular paintings, and I kind of learned by watching her paint, and I was very intrigued by her loose style, and I still have her paintings, by the way.
What medium was it?
She did oils, but she did watercolors too, and but I just watching that just fascinated me, and so and then my uncle also in Santa Barbara was an artist, and so I'd go up to his home, and he had paintings of Santa Barbara landscapes, and so I told him, hey, I can paint one of those just like that, and so I used to try to actually I copied some of his work, you know, as a little kid, because I was impressed with his mountains. And so I just had that in me, and all through elementary school, high school, I was, about the only thing I was really good at was art. And I had learning blocks all my life, which showed up in well, I could hide them pretty well through my life because you had to survive, you know, but when I got in the Army, I thought, uh-oh, they're going to find out that I've got these blocks, you know, which that was the key to my success, actually. Hard to imagine that, you know, something so negative. Like I said, I was hiding them fairly well until we got into our assignment. My assignment was to be a helicopter door gunner slash mechanic, transmission mechanic. I thought, well, that's great. I always liked making things as a kid, little bikes, putting them together. And anyway, it wasn't what I thought. And I ended up severely flunking the tests as a mechanic. And so, of course, I was called to give an account. And I remember the lieutenant looking at me and saying, "You're very curious. Here you have the worst test scores we've ever seen in this school. And you've had 5 years of college and at USC, and that's not a dum-dum school, And he said, I think we know what's going on here. And we have a term here, it's called shirker. You're deliberately trying to flunk these tests so that you'll get a better assignment." And I assured him that wasn't the case, and he kind of had a little smirk on his face, and he was actually kind of nice to me. He says, "Well, we're going to give you another try. Go back and do it. If you fail, when we see you again, you're going straight to infantry." So I got pretty shook up, and I gave it a shot. Got worse. My mind just jumbled up. And there's a reason why. It's because my mind was a creative mind, and I was even doing sketches in the class while I was supposed to be listening to the teacher. I was drawing, making little drawings, and my mind just didn't focus. It was always going back to art. So anyway, the story goes from there. It gets very dramatic, but maybe that can be something we can say down the road here.
Because I'd like to regress a little to college, because didn't a similar situation happen to you with a class at USC?
Yes, it did. I always look back on this as all humorous to me now, but I took an English class, and we had to take it to get through, so I had the English class, and it was, they were covering Henry David Thoreau's Walden Pond, as I remember. And I mean, it was kind of interesting, but I had my own little sketch pad in there, so I was drawing, and I didn't focus, Of course, test time revealed the facts that I'd never been to Walden Pond at all. And so I remember the professor, I don't know how he communicated with him, but he called me in to see him. And I thought, oh, I'm in trouble, So I went to him. He's sitting behind his desk, had a kind of a smirk on his face, and he showed me what I had done, and he kind of held up the test. He just looks at me and he says, "Why are you here?" I think that's always humorous, but why are you here? Why bother, in other words? But, it was humiliating, but at the same time, just gave me an indicator that there had to be, I was trusting in the Lord at this time. I was a very strong believer that He had a plan for my life, and that no matter how bad it looked, that He would always, make a way when it seemed hopeless. Well, it was hopeless. But I did really well in art at USC, and in fact, I got all the top art awards in drawing and painting, and I just soared in that. But the other subjects were just, I got through them. Let me put it that way. So, and of course, then what am I going to do from there? I became a teacher, and it was really a great teaching job. It was.
How did you get into that profession?
Well, I spent another year getting my education, my
Credential?
Yeah, credential. That's what I'm searching for. But I wanted to teach. I did land a job in Orange County at Villa Park High School, which was at that time, it was the most plum job if you can imagine. It was a beautiful area. It was a new school. It was kind of back in the hills a little bit, and orange groves. And anyway, it was a very good job, and I loved the kids. I loved teaching art. It was 10 weeks into the job, and I thought this will just go on for the rest of my life. This is great. And of course, then I got the letter, the draft letter, and it wasn't the normal letter though. This was not the usual. It was, now see, I got to regress here. I was a Canadian citizen, okay? So I assumed that I never had to register when I was 18. Well, that wasn't the case. And bottom line is they found out, and then the letter came, and anyway, I ended up making a plea, and they said, well, it's up to your local board. And bottom line is that the board said, you got to go. So it was actually about, if I remember right, about between 1 and 2 weeks from the time I got that notice till the time I was at Fort Ord. That's how quick it went. I had to say goodbye to the students. There was a big emotional thing because they didn't want their teacher to go. And I said, what is this about, God? I was told that he had a plan for my life, and I said, how could this possibly any good come out of this? So it was a time, it was a crossroads really, because I just remember getting on that bus to go to Fort Ord, and just before that I'd said goodbye to all the students, and it was rather emotional goodbyes, and now I'm heading off to the unknown, and this was not, if anybody remembers, the Vietnam War was not a fun war. They were taking everybody they could get. And when you were drafted, you were in a different category because you couldn't sign up for the school you wanted. When they drafted you, they decide what they want you to do. So that made it even worse. People said, why don't you run to Canada? You can go back there legally. But I didn't feel right about that, and looking back, I'm glad I did what I did because the way it turned out.
Were there any people that you talked to prior to being drafted on whether you felt this was a choice that God was leading you down, or? Yes,
that's a good question, because this had to happen in a very short time. I was grappling with this whole thing of, should I go to Canada? I even had a coin ready to toss, and I said, if heads I go, tails and I thought, I can't live myself up with that one. So I went to the pastor of the church. It was actually St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Newport Beach. So I went there and talked to the assistant pastor, and I said, I reasoned with him. I said, I don't think I can kill anybody, for one thing. I think I'm a conscientious objector is what I said. I don't know if I can. But anyway, he was a super patriot, and he says, no, you got to go. This is your duty. And I thought, oh, that's not what I expected. So then I went to Riverside and found another pastor who would agree with me, because and this guy was a whole different take on it. And he says, no, the meek shall inherit the earth. You don't need to go. You should be meek. And anyway, so I liked his approach. But then again, I didn't have any peace, And then I read a book by, I think it was J. Vernon McGee. That was his book. He was a pastor of the Church of the Open Door, famous pastor. Anyway, there was a book that he had, and I'd gone to his church, and it's Should a Christian Go to War? And really was made a great case, because he said, he made the case, just as we have a police force that protects us from the bad guys, so we need a military to keep us from the global bad guys. I said, well, that's right. So we should be able to kill for that. So my reasoning was, I followed through, and I decided it was right to kill. Okay. Now the Vietnam War was a whole different animal, so I wasn't sure if that was one that I could kill in. But when you go in, you don't decide that. They tell you to do it. So that's the way it went. So I went in, and the unknown faced me, and I left my dream behind, and where it was going to go, I didn't know. But I was about to find out that there was a tremendous God plan about to go into effect. And it turned out to be it was such a dream that now that I look back, it was like nothing could have ever been so bad and turned out so good as this for me. And here I am, I'll be 79 real shortly, and I'm fired up about getting out there and telling people my story. I almost I don't even like to go to sleep at night because I want to get up and get rolling, with the things I'm doing. And I'm out with the Freedom Committee. We go to high schools and we tell the kids our military experiences. I go to museums, I go to churches. It just seems like there's no end to. I'm supposed to go to UCI and give a presentation to a class on Vietnam in the fall, and then I can't even begin to tell you. There's just so much branching out of this. But then there's art shows. There's things coming up that are on the horizon that are just so exciting for me. Anyway, that's where I'm heading.
Well, talking about horizons,
Mm-hmm.
what was the first horizon like for you coming into Fort Ord, a creative artist now entering the military world?
Well, the best way I can say it, it was like going into Buchenwald. For me, it was, you go into you go through the gate at 2 o'clock in the morning, I guess it was, and it's fogged over, and just an eerie sight. And you go through the gate, and the MP standing there like a zombie, and he just brings you in, and then you're just really confused. You wonder where you're going to go. You're tired. It's cold. Really cold. It was the coldest they'd ever recorded at Fort Ord. Really cold. So they herded us into a auditorium, and at first I imagined this. It wasn't. I thought it was 200 or 300 people, but no. Narrowing it down, it was more like maybe a whole busload of people that were in there. And it was a terrifying moment because you wonder what is gonna. In fact, I had a distinct thought going through my head. Like the thought was, I'm gonna hear my first word spoken to me in the military, which is a kind of unique thing to think about. But as I sat there, it kept going over my head. There's gonna be your first word, and well, then my first word was heard because the lieutenant walked up, and the first word out of his mouth was Bowen, which is my name. Now, wouldn't that be, it really kind of struck me, and I thought, so I raised my hand, and he says, come up here. So I went up, and he said, go with him. There was an MP there, so off we went, and anyway, without going into the whole story.
Please do.
You want to hear the whole story? Okay. It was a very foggy night, hauled out. The military policeman was very cold, didn't say a word to me. Finally, I said, nice night, isn't it, or something, and he looked at me with a kind of just a very condescending look, like, how dare you ask me that question? And so he makes his way to a barracks, and he says, opens the door, and he says, stay here till we come and get you. And there was a little bunk there, and I was tired, and this was perfect. And so he just closes the door, and he says, stay here till we come and get you. So I had a great sleep that night and woke up with a hailstorm hitting the roof and waking me up. And it was kind of, I had to rub the windows kind of to see through. And anyway, guys were marching by with bald heads. They'd shave their heads. And I thought, what am I doing here? What's this all about? So it got later, and I got hungry. So I decided to leave and go find a mess hall, which I did. And the mess hall was a combination of guys who were already out of their dress code, and they were in their uniforms, all ranks. So I just got in the line, went and ate, and nobody said anything to me. Came out, went and found a little souvenir shop and bought some gift cards. And then I wrote all my friends. I wrote them letters. It looks like they've forgotten me, I said. And it was hilarious. In fact, those guys still to this day remember it. And even, I think they may even have the letter, because I really made it humorous. But it turned out that time went by, then I went to dinner, and I thought, oh my God, they really have, something's wrong. Anyway, I'm walking back from the mess hall, and then it's late in the afternoon, and I see that MP that had taken me there the night before, and he just was focused on some paperwork, and suddenly he kind of spotted me, and out of the corner, then he started drilling me, like, where the blankety blank have you been? And I says, well, I've been just waiting for someone to tell me what to do. So he says, well, he was really upset. Really upset. So he says, follow me. And so he takes me into the same place I was with the night before, and the same lieutenant that told me to go there. And the lieutenant was doing some paperwork, spotted me, and he just went ballistic. And he says, where have you been? You left, and anyway, it bungled his whole program up because I was supposed to join the next unit in. And so I was completely throwing a monkey wrench into the plan. And so he kind of looked at me and says, well, look, things are so messed up now. We're going to have to sort this out. So you go back to your barracks, and we'll come and get you when we have this figured out. So anyway, they came to get me finally. I kept eating in the mess hall, anyway, the reason they put me in there in the first place because I was a Canadian citizen. I had to be processed with other aliens, which they did, and we had to swear in. There was a German. This guy looked like out of the Nazi youth, you know. And then there was a guy from Tijuana, Mexican. So all three of us swore in together, and so that's the reason. But anyway, bottom line is because of all this, I missed my unit. And so I ended up in a National Guard unit in basic training. So I was the only drafted one in that unit. And so I was treated very well by the drill sergeants because they had a respect for me because they knew I was going to go to Vietnam. These other guys are going to ship off to home, you know. Anyway, that was basic. Oh yeah, we don't need that, do we?
So you trained with the California National Guard unit? Yeah,
basic training, and there may have been a couple of others that were in that unit with me, but it was 95% National Guard, and some were registered Army, or they had signed up for their Cush assignment. So it was, I think it was only just a handful of drafted ones in there. So, you know, that's the unknown, what's going to happen to you from there. And of course, then the day came when, after this terrible, horrible basic training, which it was so cold, I can't tell you. You know, inside the barracks one night, two little Army blankets, 28 degrees on the thermometer in the barracks. I saw that on there. Because of the meningitis control, you see, they had to keep the windows open. Everybody had pneumonia or was sick, and finally I got sick. I got the measles, which was the best thing that could ever happen, because they have to put you in the hospital, and yet you don't have any problem with it. So I had some funny things that happened in that in that hospital. It was a practical joker situation. That's another story in itself, but I did a practical joke on this guy. You want to hear it?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Feel free just to look over here, too.
Yeah, okay. All day, you know, this guy that was next to me, he liked to pull tricks, like he would steal my drinks, or he would, he just doing things out of fun, kind of, tease me. And so he kept doing them. He'd steal my towels, and then he'd laugh. He just had a thing about, you know, having fun with me with these things. And, but I was coughing a lot, you know, and I had the measles. And he says, well, you know what that cough is about, don't you? You know what's going to happen? He says, well, that means you're getting a shot tonight. And the shots are not fun. He said, they're the long needles, and they stick them in your bottom. And you never know, they're going to come in at night and they're going to get you, and it's going to be horrible. So all that day, teasing me about the shot. And I was coughing, and so I thought, I'm going to get back at him. So when he was asleep, I switched our charts. And so he had a little red tag, you know, if you were going to get the shot. And so he's snoring, he's out. And the nurse comes in, sees my charts, and I watched her go over there, roll him over, and give him my shot. Oh my God, this guy, he really knew I got him on that one, and he even laughed about it the next day. But anyway, that's the kind of stuff that was going on, you know.
Do you remember that guy's name?
No, I don't remember his name, but he was a joker. By the way, my friend Ken has written a screenplay on this, my story. Well, he's left that in exactly as it is, and it is one funny thing. And it's a screenplay. It's just an awesome screenplay, but it's 20-something years in the making, and we really are excited about it. Though it's going to get made.
Now,
Drawing Fire is the title, by the way, same as our book.
Now, certain veterans that I have spoken to have mentioned that they've made some lifelong friends in boot camp. Did you make any lifelong friends or have any battle buddies that you stayed in touch with from boot?
Well, no, but there was a couple of guys that, you know how people seem to kind of rise to leadership? Well, there was a couple of guys that rose to leadership, but they weren't exactly nice guys. They were kind of went to their head, you know. They wanted to do the power trip on everybody. Anyway, they were my friends, but they were in a power trip, and the war ended. I mean, I got out of the Army and everything, and I never thought I'd ever see those guys again. Well, I ran into both of them One of them was in Arizona, and he actually was working at a Chevron gas station. He had the stripes, but the other way around, Chevron stripes. And he no longer was a sergeant, and he didn't remember me, and he was up there, doing my windshields and putting the gas in, and then he recognized me. And it was a beautiful moment because he was serving me as a gas attendant. And the other guy was at a McDonald's up in Sacramento area that I ran into. He was flipping hamburgers. So, I mean, there's two things that pop in my head. I thought it was funny, Anyway.
So from boot camp, where did you go to next? AIT?
Yeah, that was the unknown, and they announced my orders, and they said, they called me my name. He said, Bowen, you're going to be going to Fort Eustis, Virginia, as a helicopter mechanic / door gunner. And I didn't know what that was really all about, but I found out soon that it was a combination school where you trained to be a mechanic, on transmission mechanic in that case. But the other part of it was helicopter door gunner, so they trained you for both. And then you would go to Vietnam, and then got to the school, and I'll never forget that time when the sergeant stood up and addressed us all early in the morning. I think it was still dark out. And he addressed the entire group, and he said, I memorized what he said to this day. He said, you're all here for 10 weeks of training. After 10 weeks, you'll be trained as killers. And then he said, most of you will go to Vietnam, and many of you will die. That's his exact words. And then he said, be prepared to honor your country by dying for your country. And everybody was just shaking in their boots. And then he said one more thing. I don't know why he said this, but he said, don't try to ever get out of the school. No one has ever gotten out, and no one ever will. I just thought that was a strange thing to say. Well, I did get out, and he was the one that got me out. So that's a story in itself. So, excuse me, the way that went, now this is sort of a humorous part of the story. Because remember I said that I had learning blocks? I don't know if I mentioned that. Well, they showed up big time in the training for the mechanic part of the school. So naturally, a test day came, and I flunked the test, royally flunked the test. So I was called to give an account. Stood before a lieutenant. He said, I've seen what your test scores, and I'm just going to tell you these are the worst test scores we've ever seen at this fort. And he had a little smirk on his face, and he says, and I think we know why it's happening. He said, you have had 5 years of college and at USC, and that's not a dum-dum school. And he says that we believe, are deliberately trying to flunk the tests. And we have a term we call shirker. That's what you are. You're a shirker. We believe you're shirking so that you'll get reassigned as a different occupation, such as a cook or a clerk or something less dangerous. And I assured him that that's not the case. And I told him I was an artist, that this was my thing. I was good at art, but not everything else. And anyway, I was a square peg in a round hole. Anyway, he wasn't real mean. He just says, well, I don't believe you. I'm going to give you another chance. Go back. If you pass this next test, then everything will be fine. If not, you're going straight to infantry. And I thought, oh my goodness. So I went back in. Things got worse. In fact, so bad I couldn't. My mind just blocked completely out. And then I realized that this was an exercise in futility. And so now I'm going to tell you something now that people are going to think I'm crazy, but I'm just going to tell you what happened, okay? So we're heading off to our class to do our daily routine, in the school. And we had to go through a forest in Virginia. This was in Virginia, close to the Pentagon, was not too far away. But we had to go through this forest, and so it's kind of a desolate area. It's maybe a few hundred yards to our school, and we're doing your left, your right, your left, and I left. I just left the formation. Anyway, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did this. Well, the guy behind me couldn't believe I did it either, because he was the only one that really saw me, because we're in a forest. And the look on his face was, are you completely out of your gourd, you know? So I just remember feeling such a complete relief. I thought, my God, it just feels so good to be free. And at least it felt that way for a little while. And then, anyway, I made my way through the forest, and I found my way to a pond. A couple of deer were drinking in the pond, and I fell asleep. I was so tired, you know, they work you to death, and so you're so tired. So I had a little pocket Bible. I read my Bible. I prayed like never before. And then I finally it just came to me, this is ridiculous. I'm in just such deep trouble. I'm sure the MPs are combing the fort for me now. So what am I going to do? And so I walked for, I think 2-3 hours, just walking, pacing, just asking the Lord, you know, and I cried out. I says, you know, you made me different. I'm just not like everyone else. I'm not faking it. And I just need your help. And I said, you know, you made me as an artist. And I said, I specifically ask you to get me into an art program of some kind. How you're going to do that, I don't know, but I'm asking you to do it. Anyway, the fear was in me, this trepidation. And finally, a thought came into my head, just go and tell the first sergeant how you feel. Now, this first sergeant was the one that told us we're going to die. Well, you don't just walk into his office.
You don't talk to a top.
No.
Like he's in that seat.
No, you don't go charging to the top. But at this point, my mind was not maybe properly thinking things through. But this is what I did, and so I saw the barracks. Now, you don't, like I said, you don't just go into his office. You got to go to the front desk. So I go to the front desk, and the clerk looks at me with a kind of. And by the way, he didn't know I was AWOL. Nobody knew at this point. So he just says, "What are you here for?" You know, kind of condescending. And I said, "Well, I'm here to see the first sergeant." I said, "We have personal business to discuss." That's exactly what I said. And I think he was inquisitive, and he kind of looked at me and says, "Well, stay right here." And so he leaves, goes down the hall, long hall, comes back in quite a while, and he said he'll see you right now. And so my heart was pounding, and he was wondering by this time what was going on too, because he thought, what is this personal business you have to discuss? So I felt like Daniel going in the lion's den. I walked down the hall, and then I could see through the door that the sergeant was sitting there without his helmet. He had this helmet on usually, and he was just sitting there, and he kind of looked at me as I walked through the door, and he just said, "Why are you here?" You know, he was inquisitive too, because he was wondering what the personal business was. And I just said, "First Sergeant, I'm in the wrong school." That's all I said. And he kind of was stunned, and for a minute he kind of like did a double, kind of sat there, and then he says, "Well, what do you like to do?" This guy was an ogre. This guy everybody feared this guy. You didn't cross this guy. He had the stripes going all the way down his arm, you know, he was very high up. And so I said, he says, "Well, what do you like to do?" And I said, "I'm an artist and I like to paint." That's all I said. And he just kind of threw his arms up and rolled back on his chair, and he said, "You're just the man I'm looking for." And I thought, what is going on here? I can't believe he said that. And then he says, "I have been thinking," I'm kind of regrouping to get the exact words, but it was something like, "I've been thinking about a painting I'd like done, and I've been really wanting to meet an artist that maybe can do this." So as we discussed, he found out that I'd been a teacher, an art teacher at high school, and he got more excited, and he says, Can you paint Jeeps, tanks, trucks, helicopters?" I said, "I can paint anything." And he said, "Okay, how about a Chinook helicopter? I'll do that." And he says, "Well, I'll tell you what. I'll tell you where you can get paints, canvases. There's a craft shop on the fort. And what I want you to do," he says, "I'm going to challenge you to paint this. If you can do this, And by the way, he still didn't know I was AWOL, okay? That's a big, important part of this, because if he did, there wouldn't have been the same story. So anyway, I think we were in there close to an hour talking about art and my background and just general stuff. He was very interested in me. And he says, okay, how long will it take? I said, it'll take probably 3 days. He says, okay, I want you to stop everything you're doing and just do it in your little cubicle, in your barracks. Do this, and when you get it done, bring it to me. And so this was the head honcho telling me to do this. And so I walk out of his room just stunned, and then the guy at the front desk, he was baffled. He says, what happened in there? And I said, well, it's quite a story. And so I didn't fill him in, but I walked out the door, and then I just lifted my arms up and started thanking the Lord. I was just up and praising him and thanking him for delivering me from the worst of the worst. And I thought, now I have my opportunity. But it didn't last long, because I heard off in the distance, your left, right, left, and it was the platoon. And they were coming back from the long day work at the class, and I knew that they were going to cross my path. And I said, I'm going to have fun with this one. And so they're walking by, and sure enough, the sergeant, and by the way, he was the poster child for the Nazi youth. He had the shaved head, he was blonde, and he saw me, and he told the guys to stand off the side until I can level this guy, and he just came at me, just charged at me, and just swearing, cussing, we're the blankety blank. Don't you realize you messed my whole unit up, and I'm in trouble now because of you? And then I just let him rant for a while, and of course the guys were standing over there shaking in their boots. And then I just said, oh, I'm going to have fun here. I said, oh, didn't you know, Sergeant, I've been with the first sergeant today. We're doing a personal assignment together, personal business, And he didn't believe it, and then it took him a while to sort it out. You could see his wheels turning, something's going on here. And then finally, he dismissed the other guys, and then he kind of pulled me in close, and he said, well, what's really going on here? And I says, no, I have an assignment. We're working on, he wants paintings done. I'm going to be his artist and do this and that. And finally, I'll never forget, he finally believed me, and he concluded the remarks with, Bowen, you're the only one I know that can step on blank and come out smelling like a rose. That was his exact comments. And by the way, he was so disarmed by it, he just changed his countenance. So I did the painting. It took me more than 3 days. I actually got permission to spend a few more days. It was a 3-day weekend, so everybody took off for the fun stuff on the weekend. And I stayed there and painted, and got it done. Took it to the sergeant. He was just, and God helped me do it. It came out pretty good, and he just loved it. And he says, oh my gosh, this is more than I expected. I think we need to hang this in the mess hall. So he hangs it in the mess hall. It's a big painting too, so it's right at the mess hall. So you got to eat when you get your food, everyone sees it. Well, that day the colonel came in to inspect the mess hall, and the colonel saw it. I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but sergeant called me in, and he said, man, you did something here. This colonel was so impressed. And now we've decided, we've talked it over, and we feel like you need to be an artist of some kind, and we want you to start painting for us. So we have a little painting shack. You got to clear out the tools. It's a little shack. It's down by a little pond. Well, it was the shack right next to the pond that I was sitting in. And I thought, what the heck? And I knew that God was in this all the way, I just was thanking him. So the sergeant and I became just like brothers, and he had me painting all kinds of pictures and plaques with a Fort logo, and then keep off the grass signs. And by the way, this little painting shack was really cool because it just had all my art tools. And then the cook would cook me up this really neat lunch every morning. And I would get in the formation with all my buddies. They'd go off to class, and I'd go to the painting shack. So I did this for so much time was being eaten up. And I even got a couple of guys to go. They begged me to get permission to help, help me mix paints or whatever. And these guys I'd get guys assigned to me for the day, And anyway, the sergeant really took a liking to me, and I was doing these paintings. And then he called me in one day and he says, I got to see you right away. And he says, and he was taking my artwork to the Pentagon on weekends. He knew people in the Pentagon. So he had me fill out some paperwork, which was a combat artist program. I didn't really understand it all, but he had me fill it out, and I did all the right things. And so he called me in and he says, Bowen, I just want to tell you, I really appreciate all the art you did for me, and you've made a big difference for everybody at this fort, and it's been just a wonderful thing. And I've submitted your art and, tried to get you into a combat art program. And he said, but I have to admit that it didn't work. I did everything I could do to get you into it. But instead, your orders are being changed. And there's a guy that said, no one has ever gotten out of this fort. He says, I've had your orders changed. You're going to leave this fort and you're going to go to Fort Huachuca in Arizona. It's a little fort in the hills. It's a wonderful old cavalry fort from the Western days. And it's just tucked in the hills. It's beautiful, and you'll have a dream job. You'll never die in Vietnam, and you'll be a clerk, And he just said, aren't you happy, And I pretended I was, because what am I going to say? No, I don't like that. No, but little did he know, a clerk is even worse than mechanic for me. It's like, this is a square peg in a round hole on steroids for me. So I didn't say that, but anyway, I had to process out, and my buddies, they were laughing their head off at it all the way this was going, but they kept saying that you're never going to get out of this school. And anyway, I had no time to say goodbye, so I just put a note under. Bob Marks was the guy, he's my bunk in the bunk there, and I just put a note, and all it said was, Bob, I'm gone. Never saw him again. But I left, and the guys that were, the lifer officers that were processing me out, they said, they can't do this. They can't do this. You've never qualified as a transmission mechanic or gunner, and you're fully certified. They can't do this. And then one looked at him, he says, well, guess the Army knows what they're doing. But to this day, my ETS records indicate that I'm a qualified helicopter transmission mechanic, door gunner, and I know nothing about either one of them. So, and I didn't argue with them. Off I went to clerk school. Okay, that's part one.
Perfect, because then I'm going to switch out this battery.
Okay, I'm on a roll, man. I get going here.
You'd be surprised, you've already been talking for an hour.
What?
Yeah, this is an hour.
I've talked an hour?
Yeah, you would not believe, but...
I hope I didn't. I got a lot of stuff in there, but man, I didn't know it was that long.
It seems like we've even started, you really have.
No, I'm telling my whole story.
See, this is what I enjoy, though, and this is why I probably going to suggest for either coming in on Thursday, or we can figure out another good schedule, but...
Yeah, we can. You want to quit now and just come back then, or?
Because as you said, you just ended with part one.
Yeah.
Actually, real quickly, let me take this out and let's look at the footage real quick.
Okay. Actually, part two is even more amazing than part one.
I think we're going to have four parts, because you're about to go to clerk school. Let me just pause this real quick.
I never told this story like I'm doing it now. I'm just having fun doing it.
Oh, I'm enjoying. This is perfect.